So Howell was in the United States from 1919 to 1923. But during that time, he worked on about 5 U.S. Vessels, 5 U.S. ships, as a seaman or what have you. And later on, it's 1923, is documented that he came to New York and he settled in the Lower East Side on Horatio Street. He took out an apartment on Horatio Street. And he also opened up a shop in Harlem. Some people call it a tea room. Some people call it a drugstore. Some people call it a folk medicine shop. If you combine all those three, a folk medicine shop, a drugstore, a tea room, and you couple it with Howell was in Harlem and Lower East Side, traversing all of Manhattan, New York City during the Harlem Renaissance, during the Roaring 20s. His age during these time, this 8-year period, was age 25 to 34, prime time. You ask me, it was a ganja shop he was running. Because during that time they had what they were called viper dens. I was telling the eyes earlier, viper dens. A viper den is a cannabis consumption lounge. Cannabis smoking was, by this time, it was beginning to be demonized with films like Reefer Madness, a lot of propaganda. So smokers, consumers of cannabis were called vipers, and where they consumed cannabis were in viper dens, akin to the opium dens of Asia. So Howell was up here. A lot of things was going on. It was happening. He would have been around other black intellectuals, other black engineers, other black doctors, other black lawyers. Is documented, he was a part of the UNIA. He was also a part of the Star Order of Ethiopia. So while Howell was on the vessels, there was a whole lot happening concerning Rasta in New York and in Chicago. So in 1917, when His Majesty was Regent Plenipotentiary. See, I got it right. Regent Plenipotentiary. The word for it in Amharic is Bela something. It sounds much better than Regent Plenipotentiary. But his title was administrative, and Zaldidu was empress. But he was running the government. He was sending emissaries to Europe, to US, and the United States. So what he did was he sent emissaries to the US to renew a treaty that the United States government had signed with Emperor Menelik in 1904, a treaty of trade. During this time, it was all about trade, and it was all about capitalism. When Martin Delany and Bishop Henry McNeill Turner, when they had a repatriation movement, it was about trade. It was always about trade. So that was a common goal, a common theme. In that treaty, it stated that there will be equal cross-citizenship for traders from the US and Ethiopia. It also said that it also recognized Ethiopia's sovereignty. Many persons, many ones and ones saw this. They saw this and they looked at it as fulfillment of prophecy. So there was a book came out in 1917. It's best described as historical fiction. In the book, it's five black men meet on May 5th. The first time they meet, they have no idea what they're meeting for. Later on, they find out in one of the meetings that one of them bring up a flag, a Ites gold and green flag, and at one of the latter meetings, they meeting about to fight against United States Jim Crowism. And they met in Chicago, actually. And they met on May 5th. As we know, as Rasta's, May 5th is a holy day for I and I. that was the day that His Majesty left and His Majesty returned to the throne of David. So in 1920 in Chicago, Prophet Grover Redding of the Star Order of Ethiopia, he held a parade. Like, you know how Garvey and them would have parades, gallant parades, like that was the big thing for us, a parade. At any rate, he held a parade where it's quoted in the Chicago Defender that he had an American flag and he had an Ethiopian flag, and he was on a horse. He burnt an American flag and he told the black people around him to pledge allegiance to this new ice, gold, and green flag and the government of Ethiopia. For me, that's big right there. That's big. This happened in 1919. To me, that's Rasta. Because they had their own Star Order of Ethiopia. They had an American flag and they pledged allegiance. When Howell went back to Jamaica, one of the things that they held him on sedition for, the British colonial government, was Howell is telling these people to give up the British crown and follow this new flag, this new nation. This happened already in 1919 in Chicago. A police officer saw him burning a flag. No, a Navy, somebody from the Navy saw him burning a flag, and they tried to rush Prophet Redding, gave him one. A black police officer tried to rush, gave him another one. Then a father and a son that was with Redding, I think they shot some other people too, but Redding was caught and he was tried and hung within like 2 days. And it was printed in the Chicago Defender, you know, them sensationalized, but something about Abyssinian cult, prophet, whatever, hung. But yeah, check it out. So that was in 1919. And then another Reverend, James Webb, he wrote he either wrote in the Chicago Defender or he was at one of Garvey's UNIA meetings where he said that the not look to the east for the coming of a black king. No, not that. But he essentially, or was it that he said? You gotta remember too, Howell wasn't a locksman. Howell was a ballhead. All these men that I'm talking about, they were all what we would call ballheads. The locks, as we know, didn't come until later. So you got Reverend Webb in 1919. You got the book in 1917. You have the burning of the flag and pledging allegiance also in 1919 by Prophet Redding. And then you have the prophecy by Prophet Webb in 1919. Then you have it was the Holy Pibby, the Royal Parchment Scroll of Black Supremacy, and then the Promise Key by Howell. But the Holy Pibby was written by Reverend Athley Rogers. I believe he was from New Jersey. I had that book. I think it was written in 1924. I had that book when I was upstate in prison. So when I was upstate, this is when so for me, this is the second time I cite up Rasta. The first time when I cited, I couldn't recognize the divinity of His Majesty. But for some reason, when I was up top, it was so simple. It was so simple for me. Like, you feel me? I guess because I was around nothing but black men. You feel me? But yeah. So while I was up top, I'm studying. I wanted to put myself in the 1920s to understand like what would make these people come up with the illest doctrine ever, the illest idea ever. Like what would make them, you understand, what were the elements that forged this thing together? So I had sent for Promise Key, Royal Parchment Scroll of Black Supremacy. That's one of the most fascinating titles for a book ever. The Royal Parchment Scroll of Black Supremacy. You feel me? That was written by Ballantyne, Reverend Fitz Ballantyne. He traveled to the West Indies also. And then Howell wrote Promise Key later when he went to Jamaica. Some people say that Howell plagiarized Royal Parchment Scroll, but it's just a continuation of Rasta, just a continuation of the doctrine, or growing and expansion of the doctrine. You feel me? So in 1940, Howell is asked, well, he's quoted in Jamaica's Daily Gleaner as saying, where did you come up, where you get this idea from? He said, I got it from the Rastafarites in the United States. Remember, Howell was there from 25 to 34 years old. He was in Harlem, in the Lower East Side, all up and down here. He would have been in the jazz clubs or in the Viper dens. That's what they call the weed lounges then. He would have been around the UNIA. He would have heard of Prophet Redding. He would have heard of Reverend Webb. Although these happened while he would have been on the ships, the vessels, the Chicago Defender was the most widely read black newspaper at this time, along with other publications. W.E. Du Bois had publications, Marcus had publications, Dussein Muhammad Ali had publications, so he would have had a chance to read about these events. He would have had a chance to read about these events in being a well-read person. So that is where Howell got the doctrine of Rastafari, from the book in 1917. And if you look at it, you have veneration of His Majesty, you have repatriation, you have allegiance to the flag, all these things, all these little pieces he molded together and went to Pinnacle with, and he busted place with. But also, there was you ever heard of T. Ras McConnell? The Guyanese? Yeah, the Pan-Africanist. In the 1935 to 1941 was a hot year for black people, because that's when the last bastion of sovereignty, of black sovereignty, was under threat from Dutty Pope. You feel me? So if you were black, you was cleaving to Ethiopia. You was sending money to an Ethiopian-friendly society. You was setting up an Ethiopian agency. So I said this to say, I forgot why I said this. What question I asked you?
If I know
T. Ras McConnell.
Yeah.
So he changed his name. I think his last name was Griffith, but he changed his name when he went to school in Cornell. He was an engineer, geologist. He changed his name to T. Ras McConnell. For me, that is also Rasta, because a man could lock his hair, or a man could change his name, or a man could change his ways. He changed his name, and he was the funder of many of the Pan-African Congresses that were held in England. And it said that T. Ras McConnell, he owned a bar, a restaurant in London. If you own a bar and a restaurant in London, you more than likely would be involved in some type of illicit market. So another way illicit markets fund revolutions.
Well, let me hear you say mountain, mountain.